Thank you once again for inviting me to your group and speaking about the Ageless Wisdom once again, another aspect of it. The title of my talk is The 9 Stages of Meditation. And today I'll be discussing and providing an overview of what meditation is and is not. I'll be talking about purposes, goals, and challenges in meditation. I'll talk about the various stages of meditation, and I'll make some concluding remarks. Most of you are here because you've had some contact with the inner planes through your own spiritual work. In today's talk, I will not be describing a particular type of meditation per se, but what meditation is about and what you will encounter as you go along. Let me do an adjustment here real quick. There we go. As I begin, there are 2 themes which I would like to underscore throughout my talk. Number 1, that we are being called by our soul or higher self to become consciously aware in all that we do and think. And this is becoming aware of the constant state of beingness that pervades our consciousness. And second, we are striving to transform our limitations, first through aspiration and later with will and purpose towards a conscious outcome. In this particular case, illumination. Meditation is a tool to enable these dynamics in consciousness to happen. Now, as Ron mentioned, there's a couple of handouts. There's going to be the Constitution of Man chart, also known as the cosmic physical plane. And you're familiar with this, and well, I'll come to it, I believe, in a little bit. And the Constitution of Man chart, basically, it shows our pure spirit, also known in esoterically, it's known as the monad. That is the expression, the pure spirit of the spiritual triad, known as the Atma, the Buddhi, and the Manas. And then the monad, long ago, during individualization, long ago, said, I need to get a connection with the physical plane. I need to completely become fully conscious in the physical plane. And I can only do this because I'm going to create a soul. And the soul got created, spark of mind, et cetera, et cetera. And here we are, million or 2 years later, or however many millions of years later. So I'm also have a handout on terminology and concepts, where I talk about the definition of the soul or the higher self. And in my particular definition, I'm using the word the soul as the intermediary or agent that exists between our pure spirit, the monad, and the personality. The soul represents both livingness and consciousness. Since it resides between spirit and the lower planes where we reside, it mediates and relates them together, hence its influence. The term lower planes is a term relative only to this human constitution chart. All 49 planes that are depicted are various gradations of density and matter. Higher planes are of a finer matter, whereas the lower you go on the chart, the matter becomes more dense. A comment on the soul. It does not exist in Buddhism. What I'm describing here is about achieving liberation in consciousness. The soul is simply that part of ourselves that helps you achieve liberation through nudging you with impression, dream teaching, and conveying energies from the spiritual triad via the mind. Throughout this talk, I'll be using terms higher self and soul interchangeably. And the abstract mind. Within the mind, there are layers of cognition and comprehension that act as a bridge between the physical plane, 5 senses, and the higher aspect of our mind, the soul. The place is called the abstract mind. It is within the abstract mind that the personality registers higher impressions and ideas from the soul. When defining the personality for the purposes of this talk, the personality is composed of physical etheric, that is, it has energy, vitality, a nervous system, and brain. There's the emotional sentient part of ourselves, and that has desire and feelings, such as fears, happiness, hopes, sensitivities, and anxieties. And the mental or mind aspect is how we think, how we process information, how we organize material, also called the concrete or finite mind. Human being is composed of three inner penetrating and interrelated energy fields, namely spirit, soul, and personality. The goal in meditation is to integrate the mental, the emotional, and the physical together with the soul so you become one conscious being. Definition of impression, very briefly, is an impression is an idea, a feeling, or something of something or someone, especially one formed without conscious thought. Think of it as your first impression of a person or a place. Impression by its very form is of a subjective nature. I mention impression as it is what the personality or the meditator will begin receiving through the abstract mind when your mind is integrated well enough. And also, finally, that throughout this talk, I'm using the term he, H-E, as a gender neutral term. So what is meditation? This teaching outlines basic stages or states of consciousness which equate to qualities of concentrated attention. What I will be describing here can help you compare with your own experience. The Ageless Wisdom tradition, which embodies elements of Christianity, Vedanta, Islam, Judaism, Buddhism, Hindu, and Theosophical traditions, identifies meditation as one corner of a triangle of a spiritual practice. The other 2/3 of a spiritual practice is studying spiritual texts and performing selfless service. So you have a complete means for bringing spiritual truth in your life through meditation, spiritual study, and service. In Sanskrit, the word for meditation is shamatha, or peaceful abiding. Peaceful abiding is a description of how the mind is in its true or natural state. But in meditation, we are not trying to create a peaceful state per se, but rather have a direct experience of who we truly are in our natural state. This involves training the mind to put aside the I of the personality and all its distractions so that the pure expression of the greater soul or higher can appear. We recognize from birth that we are conditioned to hold that only 5 measurable senses are valid, and all other states of consciousness, such as daydream, abstract mind, and dream states, are unreal. The irony here is that most basic activities of what we call the human being, such as thinking and feeling, occur within the subjective realm in consciousness, and is indeed the source of our creativity. In fact, your experience of life, of other people, any experiences of pain, love, hate, and who you think you are is also registered in the subjective realms. Also within the mind is the place called the abstract mind, which I mentioned before. It acts as a bridge between the physical plane 5 senses of the personality and the soul, where it registers impressions and intuition from the soul. An impression is an idea, feeling, or an idea about something or someone, especially one formed without conscious thought. Now, you can receive also impressions through the mind from a master or from a guide or a high-level initiate. It doesn't have to be necessarily your own soul. Whatever it is, it's undoubtedly going to be some form of higher teaching. Purpose and goals in meditation. When the meditator, you, goes into meditation, it is important for you to identify realistic goals for yourself. Here we are referring to the meditator as a person who is conducting an honest assessment of himself, where he is in life or assessment of himself in life by asking the following questions. How do I feel about myself as a person? What keeps me from realizing the oneness of my higher self? If you have a limitation such as a fear or an anger, then what are you doing about transforming the energy? What is my connection with spirit, God, or the higher self? And what are my motives and my attitude? Do I have an attitude of harmlessness? Do I have selfish tendencies? These are all things you need to honestly assess and look at within yourself. If the meditator truly looks at himself, he will become more mindful of knowing himself and have direct knowledge about who he is from a spiritual point of view. From this awareness, you can come to know your true place in the world. One of the initial concepts of taking the meditation is that the meditator is the threefold personality with the mental, emotional, and physical nature. For most people, these parts are not integrated or functioning as a whole. So an initial goal of meditation is to achieve an integration of the mental, emotional, and physical parts of the personality and see them as a complete functioning unit or an integrated personality. This will be done in stages, which can last months or years, depending on the person, and perhaps even the teaching, of course, or the method. Suffice it to say, achieving at least a relative integration will potentially open you up to greater contact with your soul. Whether you, the meditator, are a beginner, experienced, or advanced, your goals in meditation should be to calm the mind and all the monkey mind thoughts to the point of easily experiencing a natural state of mind. And then you want to initially create a steady rhythm of connection with the soul for perceiving the higher levels of mind. This will lead later on to establishing a continuity of consciousness, where the meditator is conscious of the soul and deeper states of being during meditation and in his waking state. So continuity of consciousness is a much more advanced stage. And of course, that means that you're holding the state in meditation, and then you finish with the meditation and you're still holding that state as you go into your waking life. You begin to see that you have a choice in the matter and that you do not have to act on every whim or thought or feeling. The untrained mind is like a wild elephant. There is a potential for communication and rapport between the elephant or the mind and the rider, such as between the mind and the self. But the elephant must be trained to be willing participant in this relationship. Prerequisites to meditation. Many meditators fail to make real progress because they do not pay attention to the prerequisites for developing good concentration, which is critical before meditation can begin. You will understand that actual meditation is a state of consciousness wherein you retrieve information directly from the soul or the higher planes. To establish a good foundation for the meditation practice, here are some very practical and ancient methods for providing an essential teaching on meditative concentration. You want to establish a calm space, which obviously means it's noise-free and peaceful surroundings. Means turn off your cell phone. Being content with life circumstances. The less we own and are responsible for, the less trouble in the mind. Having a life of pure ethics, for example, right living and harmlessness. Needless to say, harmful activities in heart or mind will greatly disturb the mind, such as lying or stealing or sexual misconduct. These actions create karma and negatively impact the mind. Stop the flow of intellectual thought. This has to do with fantasy daydreaming, intellectualizing the teachings, and thinking about using the lower mind. The nuance here is that the meditator is using his imagination as a means to focus on things or activities of the lower mental plane. That could be something like, I have to go do the wash, or I have to go change my oil, or I have to go shopping and I must write this down for remembering what I'm going to get. So little minor things like that put aside until after the meditation. For your posture, it's best to place the body in an upright position where the body is relaxed but cannot fall asleep. The vertical uprightness of the body allows for the energetic or the etheric energies between and around the chakras to flow properly. Right posture will directly aid in this process. Self-observation. This is an activity of directed attention where we observe the thoughts and feelings that impede your concentration practice. And then finally, the object of concentration. A well-established concentration practice is done by directing the attention toward an object in meditation, at least initially. This will prepare the mind for meditation, and you can use things such as a sacred image, could be a candle, you'll be using a sound such as Om or a mantra seed thought. I believe on the handout that I gave for the terminology, there's also mantras on there too, and affirmations. You want to learn to focus on the breath, such as pranayama or establish rhythmic breathing. You'll have to experiment and find out what's right for you for these. It's important to point out that concentration is not meditation. Concentration is used as a tool to initially focus and discipline the mind. If you want to develop comprehension in the inner planes of the inner planes and of the inner mind, then you must quiet the mind and emotions through developed concentration. Later, after concentrating the mind, you will release it and experience the state of beingness and pure awareness of the higher self. So you concentrate on the object, whatever it is, your breathing, whatever it is, and then you just let it go. And that space of letting it go, that's when your meditation begins. Oh, I forgot to mention that if there's any questions or comments, put them in the chat, or maybe somebody can let me know if there's a question or something like that. Otherwise, I'll continue going on. Challenges to meditation. During meditation, we know hindrances or obstacles will come up. A hindrance is a thought form or distraction that will prevent you from clear seeing, from clear knowing, and making a direct connection with the soul and your natural state of your being. So moving from one state to a superior one is achieved by overcoming the hindrances present at each stage. Here are some of the hindrances you will encounter. And just think of a hindrance as basically an obstacle, like monkey mind chatter, for example, is a really good way of looking at it initially. But some of the hindrances that are typical you encounter is anger, fear, selfishness. I'm attached to something, which is a thought form. I have agitation. I am restless. I am careless in what I do, or not thinking on things. Perhaps lazy. I have ill will towards something or someone. I'm in a state of harmfulness. I intend to harm, to do something. Apathy, boredom, doubt, worry, and lack of discipline. These are typical things that must be overcome. So by detaching from and observing these hindrances, it allows you, the meditator, to distinguish between thought or feeling. So to recap, why meditate? I've mentioned that meditation is based on the premise that the natural state of mind is calm and clear. Meditation provides a way to train our minds to settle into this state. Our first purpose for meditating might be that we want to feel good and achieve some respite from our agitated mind. To do this, we need to slow down and experience the mind in its natural state. We see that whatever the mind is abiding on or focusing on, such as anger, desire, jealousy, or even peace or love, that is where we are focusing our awareness. Become the observer, transform limiting thought forms, and hold your consciousness peacefully. So your meditation is also a way to slow down and observe how the mind works. When you're in a state of observing, this is your initial stages, perhaps even in the days or months or weeks and months you're practicing here, you want to become the observer. And that's very simply just to see how the mind works. Oh yes, I'm focusing on the candle flame, and all of a sudden I have to think about this person or this situation I'm going to be doing tomorrow. Bring yourself back to the center. Become dispassionate. Don't be connected emotionally or mentally with it. Do not do not attach a thought form with it. So from this observation or ability for observing, we understand that meditation is the ability for holding awareness in all we do, whether on the inner or the outer planes. As time goes by, your meditation becomes your practice. Now, unfortunately, this is a Tibetan tanka. It's not unfortunate, but it's just simply it's a larger artwork, but it's hard to see. But I'm going to be speaking about this when we're going forward with the slides. I'm going to reference this Tibetan tanka as a kind of visual metaphor, and it describes the path of liberation. Buddhists and Hindus call this tanka. A tanka is a religious depiction of a particular deity, a particular process that can take place on the inner and the outer planes. This particular tanka is called the 9 stages of meditation, the 9 stages of Mahamudra meditation, or the path to nirvana. Stage 1, concentration. Oh, are there any questions or comments so far?
You think on meditation, but I'm not really listening. No.
Anybody
well, I said until 2 my time, which is 5.
Does somebody have a question? I hear a voice in the background. Okay, no worries. Stage 1, concentration. When we begin to meditate, tremendous effort is required. An invocation of the will to gain control of your attention. The symbol for this is a raging fire. And to see this, we can see it right here on the far left. You'll see the symbology in the depiction of the picture here. To concentrate, place your conscious awareness on the object, such as the candle flame, to establish concentration. With awareness, you observe the extent of how uncontrolled thoughts, and that you can only maintain attention briefly. In other words, you are easily distracted by something other than the object of meditation. We call this the monkey mind. The first turn of the path, which you're seeing right here, is almost like a hairpin turn right here, symbolizes patience, which enables the attainment of the first stage of the meditative mind. Interruptions to calm abiding, laziness, careless attitude, and excitement are present nearly all the time. Object of concentration is held only for a short time, and at this first stage, you mainly become aware of the extent of your uncontrolled thoughts. So in this image, I hope you can see it, the excited monkey, which is actually right here, is black in color or dark in color. There's different tankas that depict different colors, and it symbolizes the lower mental excitement, that is the monkey mind. Concentration is not happening yet. The first stage, the elephant, symbolizes the meditative mind, where the dark color represents the lazy and untamed part of the mind. So you have here the monkey, which represents desire and monkey mind chatter and obstacle. It is leading the mind here in this case. The monk by the temple in the lower right corner, right here, I'm using my cursor to show the location on the picture, symbolizes the higher self of the soul. It dangles tassels, which represent it's trying to get the attention of the lower mind. The monk uses an axe an axe that's in his hand here. So it's held up straight up. Symbolizes his intention for training the mind to be disciplined by negating any distractions or hindrances. The rope that the monk extends could be represented as a teaching or an impression in establishing continual thought. At the end of this stage, the meditator begins to think outside of himself, assumes responsibilities in his life, making a commitment to the path, to the obedience of self and its purpose. So he's got to go through a whole bunch of different hoops here of controlling the mind to be able to negate the chatter, to be able to move to the next stage. Stage 2, establish continuity. Second stage involves the ability to lengthen the time of concentration on the object. There are now times when the mind is free of interruptions and times when it still is not. Still, the object of concentration is held only for a short period. The increase of whiteness in the head, notice this in the head of the elephant, symbolizes the initial soul and higher self contact with the ability to increase or hold the object in mind during the meditation. So as much as the personality, your mind, is able to hold the thought in concentration, you're able to expand this white into your body, your mind, and it spreads throughout your whole being. Note also there is times you will actually experience a light in the head. Many meditation teachings also talk about this. I've had this experience before where the head actually can light up and it feels like a warm sensation in my example, or it can have like a bright light illuminates immediately, or then it withdraws immediately too. This signals the higher self contact as you are beginning to bridge the abstract mind so that the higher mind is taking note of your efforts and you, the meditator, are increasing awareness. In this particular depiction on the tanka, there's 5 objects of desire that the meditator must learn to overcome, or they're actually sensual distractions. One can be fruit, which represents sensuality or the desire nature. The next one is perfume, can represent narcissism or glamour. Glamour is illusion in the astral body. The hare, H-A-R-E, like a rabbit, it represents dullness or laziness in mind, as opposed to the sharpness of the observer. The symbols, I don't know if they're shown here in this picture. There's other places in the tanka where these show up. The symbols represent mental and emotional excitement. There's a mirror. Mirror represents the reflection of true qualities of the Buddha or higher teaching, and the Dharma or guiding spiritual principle. These qualities are also called mirror of the Dharma. I'll show that as we go along. There's some other depictions of that symbol. And seeing the path in its true form. The symbol in this tanka shows up at different times. Note that esoteric inquiry is relatively strong, and the student will want to understand the changes he is sensing within. This can involve seeking answers through spiritual study. So the person on this path or this that is experiencing it at this stage is definitely interested in finding out, what are these obstacles and how do I overcome them? Oh, I will do this through studying this technique or learning this technique. So spiritual study. This is approximately the time when the path of devotion to an ideal ends, and also can be the time when purification begins. In the Alice Bailey teachings, we call this moving from the mystical path, the path of devotion, to a person or an ideal, and moving on to what's called the probationary path. The probationary path is a time of purification, and it's also a time when you consciously say, I want to purify my lower self, which means my mind, my thoughts, my emotions, my feelings, my etheric body. You are learning to realize that you are the higher self. This comes into your consciousness and can overcome obstacles, hindrances, and can expand your consciousness. This is approximately the stage, perhaps even earlier, when you, the spiritual seeker, begin to consciously link and blend the heart and mind to express the will to good. On subtle levels, your heart will naturally become stimulated, and this will translate in less criticism, so pure love and compassion will flow from the soul. Perhaps at this time, in this case, you may be interested in, with the will to good, you feel inclined for going out and being of service in the community in some capacity, whatever that means to you or however that comes to you. Stage 3, corrective or patch-like placement. If there's any questions or comments, Ron, just interrupt me and I'll just answer the questions. Otherwise, I'll just keep moving on.
We're doing good. Thanks, David.
Excellent. Or anything in the chat too. So
I'm watching it. Thank you.
Good. Go for it. Okay. At the third stage, which is corrective or patch-like placement, the mind recognizes the distraction more easily and can return to the state of concentration. The term patch refers to mending or correcting the distraction using applied technique, such as a seed thought, such as I am one with my higher self, or visualization technique. And here you want to refer to the handout I gave you, which gives you some ideas about mantras or affirmations you may want to work with. The mind becomes pristine at this stage. The monk has succeeded in slowing the mind. Here you are learning to distinguish the difference between the gross, such as anger, and the subjective energy and attachments. Now the monk or the higher self has a rope around the elephant's neck. If you look closely here, you can see there's like a little extended darkish line there going to the elephant's neck, or the neck of the mind, so to speak. This indicates that mindfulness and vigilance are becoming more active in the meditator's mind as the higher self is expressing its greater control. And also, if you refer to the human constitution chart that I have, that's one of your handouts, if you'll look there at the personality, you will see a dotted line going across there. And that's at the mental plane level. And that dotted line represents the conscious mind saying, I want to connect with my higher self using an affirmation through concentration, whatever, in meditation. So you're crossing that dotted line. The dotted line, of course, is all symbolic. Here, the aspirant crossing the dotted line is learning to move into the abstract mind and become aware of impressions from the higher mind. The rabbit or the hair on the back of the elephant's mind represents laziness. Laziness, it invades our practice, and when you begin to feel, I'm starting to do it right, you may say. It's another wake-up call for vigilance and overcoming dullness in the mind. This allows us to pass to the next stage. The backwards look of the monkey is, I hope you can see that, it might be a little blurry, I don't know, but the monkey is looking back toward the elephant and toward the higher self here, and symbolizes that the meditator recognizes mental excitement and he can bring the mind back to an initial focus and concentration. So once again, corrective patch-like placement. I use a technique for concentration, and it brings me back to focus in the mind, focusing on pure beingness and pure awareness. Again, we have the monk is extending the rope there to connect with the lower mind, the higher mind of the soul, or the monk is the higher mind of the soul, and it's connecting with the lower mind through impression. The fruit, which is, this is symbolic of the fruit up here, this symbol, symbolizes the ability for overcoming temptation and sensual pleasure, such as desires. It should be pointed out that although one of the effects of meditation is that it stimulates the lower centers, When this happens, one can offset the desire energy through the throat with speech and creative expression. So if you study the chakras or the centers, you'll find that there's dual connections, such as you could have sensual desire, sexual stimulation. That's in your second chakra. If you want to move that energy upwards, you can go toward you can go up toward the fifth chakra, which is the throat. So there's a 2-5 connection, the second chakra with the fifth chakra, the throat. And therefore you can speak it out, or you can sing it out, or act it out even on a physical level. To completely master this level, you need to practice mindfulness, self-observation, to be completely aware of what we are doing, what you are doing. This will not happen all of a sudden, but over time. During this stage, the mind becomes aware of the presence and the absence of ebbs and flows in consciousness of the higher self contact. You are left to maintain stability in your mental, emotional, and physical natures alone in this case. A mental polarization has begun, and this means that you are learning to hold a mental focus, thinking and awareness in your consciousness and working with thought energy as opposed to emotional reactivity. This represents a blending of the mental and the Buddhic levels in your consciousness. Again, this is looking at the human constitution chart. If you look at the where the spiritual triad is, just beyond the soul, there is the plane of the intuition. You're connecting, you're learning to connect and bring forth the Buddhic energies into your lower self, particularly into the astral body, and transform the lower emotional energies. So you're replacing astral energy with Buddhic energy. Stage 4 is called deepening commitment. Although you no longer completely lose the object of concentration, lack of discipline and excitement still will occur, and so you must continue to practice concentration. As both the monkey and the elephant look backward, they symbolize the meditator whom recognizes his own mental excitement, again, the stimulation of desire, and could bring you back to the initial focus under the influence of the higher self's influence, which means you could also be through spiritual study. The higher self's influence could be, once again, impression. You're getting through the abstract mind. You're getting the idea to, oh, by the way, I need to be focusing in this way, or I get the impression to go study this particular technique so I can take it into meditation. Be aware that you are offsetting a habit in your mind and creating a new groove in consciousness, as I call it. Symbolically, the monkey represents, once again, the monkey mind, and it is now black from the waist down. It's about 50% contained, just as you, the meditator, are learning to do. This symbolizes that mental excitement has decreased in intensity by about half and could no longer pose a significant distraction over the lower personality. This is symbolic of the emotional energies of the personality being gradually replaced by Buddhic from the spiritual triad. So as a result, pure reasoning and not reactivity is the result. The conch shell, which is this right up here, this white symbol here, is a symbol of wisdom of the Buddha's teaching, or for any focused or powerful spiritual teaching, which spreads in all directions of the mind. Just as on the Bhagavad Gita, you have Arjuna and Krishna are on the battlefield, and they're using the conch, excuse me, the conch to blow a loud sound, which calls people to become aware and come into battle. And so here it is, the conch shell is calling you to come into focus and learn to be aware and as the observer of your own thoughts and distractions and learn to overcome them. And this can also include beginning working with the subconscious and to clear the way for greater awareness to become dominant. Stage 4 continued, deepening commitment. It's important at this stage to never forget that you are practicing mindfulness, even in your waking state outside of meditation. Because when you're affecting, well, let's see, when you're in the subjective realm in your consciousness, you're concentrating, you're working with thought energy, you're working with emotional energy, you're working with replacement techniques, you're working in the subjective realm. The subjective realm is of a very fine nature. And of course, the higher you go up on the human constitution chart, it becomes finer energy still, and lower you go down, it becomes denser. You're working with a fine state of matter, and your very thoughts can affect the state of the matter. So it's almost like a fabric. It has this particular feeling and sensitivity to it. So you want to understand that distractions still appear, but no longer pull your attention away. The mind is learning to stabilize, and you are learning to become the conscious observer and not reacting, but responding to whatever is happening. Note the fire of agitation is becoming smaller, and here desire is losing its grip on you, and you are learning to respond to people and stimulation and not react again. The mind at this stage is stabilizing again. You don't want to forget that you're practicing once again, because you take this into your waking state too. In addition, thought forms in the concrete mind have been overcome, but still linger in the subconscious. Things will still come up. The meditator must exert control. You, the meditator, must exert control and consciousness to overcome this. This is considered to be an advanced stage. Keep in mind that one of the main purposes of meditation is to purify all levels in consciousness, particularly in the lower sheaths, that is, the mental, emotional, and physical plane. This results in transformation of the etheric body and the chakras. Stage 5, maintaining through discipline. At stage 5, the meditator has developed his awareness through experience and deep study of how distractions and excitement holds him back. He has learned of the great advantages of practicing calmness or negating reactivity. And this is all done with effort through developing observation and the will. This represents another plateau for expanding the consciousness and awareness. The influence of the higher self or the soul is consciously stopping mental excitement, and the fire of the lower concrete mind declines. The mind is brought into a state of single pointedness through the use of the will. So at this stage, and perhaps even a little bit earlier stages also, you're making progress as the soul's energies, the impressions, the ideas are coming into your consciousness, and they're also transforming your lower etheric energy of your mental, emotional, and physical self. In this picture here, part of the tanka, the monk is in front of the elephant, which means the monk is now guiding the mind of the elephant. Notice the elephant is approximately 50% pure with the white, and still the dark here still represents the wild part that is being subdued. This indicates that purification has taken place. The monk is using the battle axe or labrys, symbolizing the willful imposition or the breaking of all worldly attachments. The monk is extending his arm holding the axe toward the mind of the elephant. At this stage, the meditator is strongly aligned with the higher self and following its lead through impression, through a thought form or a dream. At approximately this stage, the student, now disciple, will be seriously working on demonstrating control over his emotional state. And in the Alice Bailey teachings, we call this the second initiation. The person is going through really focusing on controlling their emotional body. Remember, you are striving to realize your true self or your higher self. The polarity has clearly shifted from the emotional to the mental plane. Now the disciple can intelligently deal with his own karma. Serious esoteric study of the teachings, directly dealing with one's own limiting thought forms and glamours, or illusion in the astral body can now take place. So the mind, the lower mind, in the teaching, in combination with the teaching with the soul, is learning to control the mind so that they all become one. You're ultimately wanting to become the mind of the soul. Again, the mirror appears. At this stage, the let's see, the mirror of the Dharma appears between stages 5 and 6. This symbolizes another higher teaching of the Dharma. So what you're doing is you're learning as you go, literally, of course. You're purifying, and as much as you purify, you're pulling away anything that blocks you from direct experiencing of the higher self or the natural state of mind. So the mirror of the Dharma represents a new teaching that allows you to remove more obstacles, perhaps from the, in this case, perhaps from the subconscious, and seeing the path in its true form. And another expansion of consciousness takes place. This will be at this stage where the will is brought to the fore, that is, where you're controlling things in your lower tendencies with an active will. The disciple, through his contact with the higher self, is also learning to hold the point of tension with his or her greater group, realizing its purpose are greater than his own personal problems. This gets into another part of a teaching, which I'll just briefly go over. When I mentioned the hold the point of the tension of the group, you are part of a higher group, which is part of the ashram. The ashram is up on the Buddhic plane where the masters dwell, and the master has a particular focus of a particular group, and that you're part of that at the beginning of the probationary stage, which means you're beginning of the path of purification. You won't really become conscious of this group except through maybe you'll have dreams that you're maybe in a classroom or you're learning a new teaching or something. That could be perhaps your first experience that you're part of an extended group of other fellow esotericists with a higher purpose and teaching that you're working to bring to the world. Stage 6, establish tranquility in the mind. At this point, meditation in the previous stage to overstimulate the subconscious mind is bringing up fears. This can result in a fixation of the mind, but you will have little difficulty in neutralizing or transforming it as you've learned techniques to subdue them. Working as the observer, you will practice discrimination in mind and identify the cause. So you'll start rooting out what are the things in your life that have been driving you to have this particular fixation on this fear, this anxiety, and you don't know where it's from. Well, it's coming from a subconscious tendency, perhaps a trauma earlier in this life, and perhaps even from a past life. And you're learning to balance or offset this karma and pacify it. The difference between the 5th and the 6th stages is that subjective excitement becomes less frequent as you are honing your abilities through mental techniques to control your mind. As we noted in stage 5, the monk is now leading the elephant and the monkey trails behind. So here's the monkey, the desire is behind here, represented also here is the raging fire representing desire. It's all behind you now. It's behind the mind. It's behind your focus and concentration. And now you're being led calmly by the monk who is guiding you now in front. And you're approximately 70% pure as the elephant, as depicted here. So 70% pure in your etheric body, approximately. At the next turn of the path, stages 6 and 7 are called the power of joyous effort. Through diligence, this stage shows that the meditator has gained such control over his mind and the lower nature that he can easily overcome any obstacle. This enables the attainment of the 7th and 8th meditative stages. Stage number 7 is called one-pointedness or stillness. At the 7th stage, the disciple is aware of his perception of the mind, and it becomes very subjective and difficult for laziness or laxity and excitement to arise, and they're immediately put down or overcome with effort. Note the monkey is standing at the foot of the, no, it doesn't show it here in this picture, but the description and the actual tanka, the monkey ahead of the elephant is about 90% pure white. This shows that the monk is completely guiding the mind. This indicates that most of the meditator's lower energies or fires in his mind are burnt off and under control. Note there's a separation from the monkey, symbolizing the aroused mind, and demonstrates control of the lower mind distractions. In other tankas that are similar to this, there's still a little black in the hind end of the elephant, symbolizing that the little laziness and excitement still exists. In this case, the elephant is completely white, but he can't, and that the laxity or the excitement can be overpowered in some other tankas. But with a small amount of mindfulness or applied technique with the help of the higher self, he still will be able to stop any laziness or excitement when they arise. Here, there is a continuity of consciousness as the mind is so developed that it can hold its concentration with the higher self almost continuously. And this is akin to also holding the focus not only during meditation, but in your waking and working life too. At approximately this stage, the etheric body will have been integrated with the higher self, approximately 75%, and the disciple will now will be taking the third initiation, and illumination of the mind can happen at this stage. The third initiation is a term from the Alice Bailey teachings. In the Index of the Secret Doctrine, dated 1888, it speaks of 4 grades or initiations. In the 1892 Theosophical Glossary, initiation is defined as one who has initiated into the arcane knowledge taught by the hierophants of the mysteries or the masters, by the adepts of mystic lore. So the adept is a person who has achieved mastery over the lower 49 planes or is near to doing that. And of course, the masters have mastered the whole 49 subplanes, the planes and subplanes, and they are seeking to make connection with the higher logos. With regards to the disciple becoming self-initiated, this means that emotional reactivity has been completely neutralized. Motives have a pure intent, that you have nothing but harmlessness in your consciousness. Many of you are probably familiar with the term that the disciple cannot approach the master unless he has lost the power to do harm. That, of course, is to do harm in thought or consciousness. With illumination of the mind probable at this point, this is your first opportunity to see the plan of evolution in consciousness and have a direct experience of it. And of course, your illumination is with the Buddhic plane also, where you're getting a complete illumination of that. And you're also connecting with the monad, the higher self, the highest self. And you're being illuminated by that being. So you are learning to become the Atma, will, the Buddhi, and the Manas. In stage 8, it's called single-pointed concentration. At this state, you can concentrate continuously on the object without interruption of any laziness or excitement for the entire meditation session. You, as the meditator, have a single-pointed concentration towards the path, or you have become the path, as you are living the teaching. This can symbolize the monk as spirit, monad, and that you can easily walk the path and have where you have completely overcome all mental and emotional distractions or earthly excitements. This enables the attainment of the ninth stage of meditation. Now, of course, I didn't mention the fact that you have, there's a long period of time between the time when you said, you don't say I'm very unconscious, you just are unconscious and you learn to expand your consciousness. You're at that point where you first become a meditator. And did you learn that there's something much greater than yourself, to the point of where you've expanded your consciousness to this single pointed stage of concentration. And this can take lifetimes to do this. And you're not going to do this in one lifetime, most likely. I suppose there possibly could be exceptions, but I don't know of any in this time that we live in now. And the Buddha was able to do that, and of course, Master Jesus, but there's other beings, perhaps sages and mystics, who were able to do that too. Stage 9, placement with equanimity, also called liberation. The elephant or the mind rests peacefully next to the monk or the higher self. The mind and personality are completely at one and they are tamed. The disciple is connected with the manas with the intent of consciously dissipating karma. So that means that they've gone through possibly the fourth initiation, which is completely negating all karma and connection with the physical plane. So the final turn of the path is accomplished. Your mind, personality, and the higher self, the monad, are one. This symbolizes perfection over any hindrances and demonstration of complete mind control. So what this means as when you have complete illumination of the mind with the monad, you and the monad are one, you are the monad, and the consciousness of the monad, the Atma, the Buddhi, and the Manas has completely penetrated and come here into the lower planes. Effortless concentration on the object can be continued at any length, which means you may be doing service, and you may be even radiating your energy outward to contact people through perhaps telepathy. The difference between the 8th and the 9th stages is that the 9th no longer requires effort. The example here could be learning to drive a car. At first, it's a stress as you're not used to being behind the wheel and making decisions. Later, it becomes second nature. The rainbow ribbons, you can see a little bit of the ribbon right here extended. I'll show that shortly in the next image. The monk on the back is riding the right elephant. You'll see this in the next image, as he's now the Arhat, or fourth level initiate, as mentioned before, perhaps even a master. And it means one who is truly worthy. He has complete control of the mental, emotional sensation of his mind, and having mastered Maya and illusion. The cycle of karma and rebirth now ends as a destruction of the causal body is complete. And the causal body, for those who do not know that term, is a term, it's used in the Alice Bailey teachings. I'm not sure, maybe Blavatsky uses it in The Secret Doctrine, I'm not sure, but it refers to the body of the soul. And there is where all karma is stored, good and bad karma, or wise and unwise things were learned, and then they're overcome and they're completely purified, and then the causal body is destroyed or eliminated at the fourth initiation, as it's no longer needed. So here's an image of the upper part of the tanka. We can see here the monk in the lower left side here is sitting reposed and peacefully with the mind. See, the monk and the mind are together calmly. Here's the rainbow ribbons. Here is the Arhat, who goes up in consciousness and becomes master. So here he is as the master, and he returns to the earth, if that is his choice, for earth service. And this is all part of the teachings too. This is all symbolic in this imagery here. Okay, and see the monk. Let's see. In this case, the monk The monk is wielding a sword symbolically, a flaming sword of perfect insight, which means he's a master now. There's no gender as a master. It's just simply, it's an easy way to say it. The master now has the flaming sword, and he has now attained the flame of clear understanding and mindfulness as he returns to the earth with a concept of service and purpose. So you're able to use the cities for higher service. And cities is city is a Sanskrit term, which can be translated as perfection, accomplishment, attainment, or success. And the cities are spiritual powers where the master or it could even be the initiate could have cities too. They're using their abilities or attainments, expanded consciousness, because of spiritual advancement through a discipline, meditation, and yoga. The cities are described in Book 3 of the Yoga Sutras by Patanjali. So to sum up, at this stage, the final stage, the mind has overcome all hindrances and achieved nirvana or samadhi or mahat samadhi. And that is the stages of meditation. Does anyone have any comments or questions about anything I've said? Am I, yes. In the chat, let's see.
This would be Coral, who asked us responding connection to a group. Does that happen on a spiritual plane?
Yes. Like I say, when you get to a certain state in consciousness, you start to become aware of being part of a larger purpose and group. In my particular case, well, like in your case, you're part of a group called the Theosophical Society. And that group has a particular thought form for basically service in the world. You're providing a service for me to come and speak. You've had other speakers too. You have other activities you do. Those are part of spiritual study and service also. There's millions of groups in the world that are performing service, anything from volunteer work to providing guidance for people on all possible levels. There's also another teaching which I'm working with also. It's called the 10 Seed Groups. This is a teaching through the Alice Bailey teachings where they talk about from the Buddhic plane of where the masters reside, or that's approximately where they reside according to the teachings. They have purpose for influencing people on the lower planes, perhaps the politicians, perhaps the scientists, perhaps educators, perhaps people in the media, perhaps people in finance or people in the arts, across all the 10 seed groups. And it also could be people in the broadcast industry, the print media, or perhaps people that are speaking to the public through Facebook or through whatever. They don't necessarily, they just focus on people who are spiritually developed, and they telepathically or send impression to them. And these are groups with a higher purpose. And the purpose is for making the plan work out. And what is the plan? It's the plan of God. It's the plan of evolution working out on the physical plane. It's something we can only have a sense of and not know until the third initiation or have a direct experience of it. And we are all part of, well, most of us are part of it who are, we may or may not be conscious of our particular group that we're part of. Or maybe you feel like you're just freely moving along from one group to another, whatever, that's great. Eventually you will light on a particular teaching or teacher, and that guides you, that feels right to you. And this will connect you with deeper parts of yourself and give you purpose and direction. And it will possibly and ultimately connect you with a group and a group teaching. There's more to be said on that, but does that answer your question?
Coral, you're still with us here and you're on mute.
Yes, thank you so much. I appreciate your explanation on that.
Not a problem. Does anyone else have any comments or questions?
Yeah, road map, sort of a situation here. We talked basically about all of the different stages, but I missed getting comfortable with when we were at the first initiation and third initiation. I got second initiation was going to be out there when we were comfortably tucked away at the fifth, one of our stages, and our fourth initiation was going to be at the ninth. Where did the first and the third happen?
Okay, the first initiation, well, I'm going to be, because my major focus is through the Alice Bailey teaching. So I'm using
Sure.
their terminology.
Can you
And so-
give me your interpretation, David?
Yes, of course. So the first initiation refers to, it's a stage of purification. And it's where you, not necessarily the meditator, but you who is conscious, you are becoming spiritually conscious, which means you're going outside of yourself and becoming aware of people and situations who are in need of service greater than yourself. So you're starting to leave selfishness behind. You're starting to leave the me-only mentality behind. You haven't let it go yet. So that's the first initiation. And you're also starting to move toward a service activity and becoming responsible for who and what you are and what you're doing, which means responsible for your thoughts, for your actions and things like this, because as we know, thoughts become actions and then that becomes karma. So, and karma doesn't always have to be negative, but frequently it is, as we know.
Right, David?
Yeah, so what was the other part of your question again? I'm sorry.
Third, sir, where does third happen to hit a threshold?
The third initiation will basically take place. Okay, well, one thing to initially keep track of, when I think I talked about it at the beginning, is when you're starting to learn about meditation, you're learning to concentrate, and you're sincerely, the word sincerely is underscored, is the fact that you want to honestly take a look at yourself and who and what you are, what you think you are and what you are not. You're learning all this type of stuff. Well, you've gone through a considerable purification. That's maybe, I don't know, age 4 or 5. Let's see, where do we get to here? Well, one of these stages here, stage 5 here, maintaining through discipline. I talked about you're demonstrating control over your emotional nature. That's approximately the second initiation. The major initiation, well, for the achievement to go forward, is for you to willfully suppress and put down all negative thoughts, criticism, selfish tendencies, desires, all this type of stuff. So you become simply saying, I am connected to my higher self. I'm connected with purpose. This is all known in consciousness, of course. You don't verbalize this, of course, but you feel this in consciousness. You know it in consciousness, saying, I am on the path, and this is what I must do to put down these obstacles and hindrances. So that's when you successfully have achieved that considerably, you will have approximately purified your lower etheric body, which means your mental, emotional, and physical nature. You purified it approximately 50%. These are relative numbers of your etheric body. And then on the second initiation, there's an important point which bears mentioning. There's something that somebody mentioned a long time ago. I don't know where I got this from, but there's what's called initiation 2.5. And yes, initiation 2.5, because at this point, when you're on the path, you're realizing that you're trying to overcome the path of involution. The path of involution means you have an attachment toward all things of the physical nature, all things of the could be carnal, it could be desire nature, it could be anything of the form nature that draws you is the path of the involution. For those of us, the esotericist, this person who's meditating and focusing, he or she is on the path of evolution. That is wanting to transcend the limitations of the physical plane. So, and just about any distraction that you have, hindrance, obstacle, etc., those are all distractions that need to be completely overcome. And this is done during the second initiation. And of course, that 2.5, like I was saying, 2.5 is the time when you decide, this comes into your consciousness, simply saying, yeah, I recognize that all these things that I've done before, all this desire stuff and all this agitation, criticism, and control of people or whatever, selfishness, I realize that's what I was doing before, but that's not who I am. I realize this now in consciousness. I am moving forward, I am evolving, and now I say I'm on the path of evolution and my higher self is guiding me. That's the path of evolution. And at that point also, you're feeling as if you are part of a river, and that river is drawing you forward towards the third initiation. This is all symbolic, of course. It's a sense, it's something you sense in consciousness, and it's individual for each person. So the second initiation, the first initiation is all about purification. It's learning about service and getting out of the self and learning to be there of service for others. The second initiation is learning to do the same thing, but willfully demonstrating control over your lower self and tendencies. And then, of course, and saying that I'm really on this path and that's where I want to be and that's where I want to go. So that's the 2.5 moving forward toward the third initiation. And then the third initiation, yeah, the third initiation, of course, is illumination. So, any other questions?
All right, looks like we got a clean slate on your clearance to go back to being a household member.
Okay.
Look, I tell you, what's really fun about this is you have a nice approach to it and you're very, very comfortable to listen to. So David, thank you for joining Portland Lodge again one more time.
Thank you.
So there's another thing that's really cool as we continue to exist through this kind of a forum. And I'd like to talk